when I entered the Ampeti camp in Kenema, I saw victims of the war, the 11 years war in Sierra Leone. Those people, they are a symbol of resilience and strength, because being living with the result of the war is not easy, and that is something some of us who we are not part of the war couldn't even bear to live with. They are a symbol of strength and resilience.
Patricia Siagivao,
But
a
also
reporter with the Freetown Daily
because
Awoko newspaper,
that has brought
recalls her experience
life
covering life in a
anxiety
camp for war
and
victims.
those
She was among a group of West African journalists who are undergoing training on reporting on the interconnection between minority rights and conflict across the sub-region. Givao was 3 years old when the civil war in Sierra Leone ended in 2002. She had little knowledge about the level of brutality beyond what had been explained to her. This first-hand experience with these victims left a huge mark on her psychologically.
stories at that very moment when I was at the camp. I mean, it's moved me to like I imagine myself being with them at that particular moment, when they were facing these challenges. So it was not really easy for me. But thereafter, being part of this event, it has greatly improved my way of being listening to their stories. So at that moment, I've known that you don't put yourself in a situation where you feel hopeless. Instead of them, you have to put yourself together so that you'll be a strong pillar. They can lean on.
The Sierra Leone Civil War remains one of the most brutal in Africa's history. A 2011 report by RefWorld, an online source of information on refugees, indicate that some 27,000 people were disabled or had at least one of their limbs cut off by rival factions during the 11-year-long war. Many of these people live in camps across the country, one of which is the Norwegian amputee camp in the outskirts of Kenema City in the eastern part of the country. But it wasn't only Gevao who was affected by the stories of these men and women who live in squalid conditions in this camp. The whole team of journalists from Ghana, Senegal, and Sierra Leone were affected too, says Dr. Francis Soa, coordinator, Media Reform Coordinating Group.
We saw some journalists who were even crying when they had terrible stories. What that shows is that aside the fact that we're journalists, we're also human beings. When we are terrible stories, we feel them. So even us, the journalists or activists, as we do the work, we also have to prepare our minds psychologically.
The visit to the camp is part of an ongoing training of a larger group of journalists under the Engaging Media and Minorities to Act for Peacebuilding, or EMMAP, a project of the Minority Rights Group International, or MRGI. The European Union-funded initiative was designed to provide support for journalists and minority rights activists in gaining skills and experience to change the narrative on human rights in West Africa. Over 130 journalists are taking part in the training, which also involves field trips to minority communities in the three countries. A component of the training also entails sessions on mental health and fatigue for the participating journalists and activists. Gavao is one of 10 journalists who underwent this training last week during a national retreat organized by MRCG in the southern city of Bo. Dr. Soa explains the purpose of the training, which was held in the Doha's Hotel during the opening session.
The retreat is designed to train participants on mental health and fatigue, deepen their learning and appreciation of critical issues relating to exclusion and discrimination against minority and indigenous communities. MRCG and its partners recognize the need for the participants to have this national retreat to help promote minority rights issues and addressing psychological impacts on mentalities over the period, especially with the journalists that were fortunate to take part in the previous field trips to minority areas, in seeing them expressing these emotions by shedding tears, which shows that being a journalist and an activist they are also capable of showing emotions too. So the most important aspect for this training is to prepare the minds of journalists and activists in reporting disturbing minority issues.
The three-day event from September 11 to 13 also attracted civil society activists, among them Esther Tolly.
For me, I think as an activist, this retreat is quite more useful to me in the work I do every day. You know, working with other people in the life of activism. I think this training I've learned so many ethics as an activist and how far I should have the relevance, I should have the credibility, I should have the efficiency, the sustainability push forward in solving issues, especially minority issues in society.
Mohammed Sa, a reporter for the A to Z newspaper, was also part of the Kenema amputee camp field trip.
I was part of the team that visited these minority communities, and I was also a victim of emotional stress or distress. We went to a place called in Kenema, where these war-wounded and amputee people are staying. We listened to their stories. Majority of us cried. Literally, we cried, and even our coordinator burst into tears. So now the training has aided me, has enhanced me to be psychologically calm and prepared to face different stories, to hear from different aspects of minority people and write them and amplify their problems through my head of my newspaper I use.
MRGI is implementing the EMMAP project through Minority Rights Group Africa, alongside local partners MRCG in Sierra Leone, Media Platform on Environment and Climate Change or MPEC in Ghana, and Fahamu Africa in Senegal. The participants at the boat training were taken through some basic principles and ethics on reporting on minority rights, including sessions on policy and legal frameworks on conflict resolution, ethics and standards in conflict, migration, and minority reporting. Dr. Victor Masakoy, a communication, social, and governance expert, was lead facilitator at the boat training, which also entailed several sessions on relevant media and communication skills.
And the second one says, as professionals, list down 2 ways we can maintain or project empathy. Because guess what? That man report you, God forbid, you know what happened to you, you never report to you. So you are empathized. So 2 ways. You list down 2 ways that we can maintain or project empathy, professionalism, credibility, and objectivity while dealing with migrant minority groups.
There was a session dedicated to viewing reports on conflict and minority issues across the country, as well as a one-to-one psychological session for the participant by psychologist and Jala University lecturer Mari A.E. Bokari. Like Gevao and Mohammed, several other participants in the boat training had taken part in previous field trips where they encountered similar traumatic experiences of minority communities. A few days from now, the third batch of trainees will depart for the Senegal field trip. For this group, says Patricia Christiana Sanko, project officer at MRCG, this training comes in handy.
It's part of the project to train these journalists how they will have a successful reporting in these minority issues and how they will be able to gather information relating to minority issues at ease without having to use their emotions in reporting. And also, it will help them to acquire these informations from these minority groups. These minority groups have issues in sharing these informations.